And let's welcome in our fine readers on this Thursday morning. Let's welcome Bill Everhart and Jack Martin. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Paul. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone down the line there. This is Jack Martin with the World Herald. Let's start out with a sidebar story out of the Philadelphia Democrat Convention. And it begins, Ingrid Olsen chafes at the idea that as a woman, she should support Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. It's not that she's against putting a woman in the White House. It's just that Olsen, who is 38, doesn't think it's that big of a deal. She also doesn't think gender should be a deciding factor when casting a vote. Olsen, who supports Bernie Sanders and lives in Council Bluffs, said, "I've always lived in a world where blacks to me were my equals, where my mother worked out of the home, and where gay rights soared. Having a female president would be a wonderful thing, but it's just not hitting the ball out of the park for me." Hillary Clinton will make history tonight as the first woman to accept a presidential nomination from a major American party. Her speech will mark the end of the convention in Philadelphia. The historic nature of Clinton's candidacy has been met with varying degrees of cheery excitement and symbolic yawns from women in the Iowa and Nebraska delegations. Older women tend to view it as a mile marker moment in their lives, while some younger women can't quite understand all the fuss attached to Clinton's run for the White House. The differing viewpoints may come down to whether there was ever a time in their lives when they didn't believe a woman could be president. Olsen said she was raised by her parents to believe she could do anything. She also believes it's only a matter of time until a woman becomes president, regardless of whether Clinton wins in November. But older women long lack that optimism. 78-year-old Peg Lippert grew up in an era when teachers and others encouraged little boys to believe that they could one day be president, but little girls were excluded. She said younger women didn't go through the women's movement, so they don't appreciate the significance of this. Maybe they kind of take it for granted. The age gap among female voters dogged Clinton throughout her primary battle with Bernie Sanders, who is the favorite of young Democrats. Several polls this year showed Sanders with a 30-point edge over Clinton among women aged 30 or younger.
Thank you, Jack. We were just talking about some of the problems that we had with the Lincoln Journal-Star on computer, and I run into one right just like that. So making a case for optimism. This is from the Washington Post in Philadelphia. In an election season in which restive voters of all stripes are frustrated with the status quo, it fell to President Barack Obama on Wednesday to argue for staying the course by giving Democrats a third term in the White House, and that Hillary Clinton is the right person to keep moving the nation forward. There has never been a man or a woman more qualified than Hillary Clinton to serve as President of the United States of America, Obama said about the one-time rival who became his Secretary of State and whose election would burnish his legacy. On Wednesday, the Democratic National Convention also formally nominated Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, and that's with a Kaine, as its vice presidential pick, noting that his eldest child is a Marine who deployed to Europe on Monday. Kaine said, "I trust Hillary with our son's life." It was the first night in which the Democratic speakers focused heavily on the themes of national security and foreign policy, and their most concerted effort to undermine Republican nominee Donald Trump on issues where he has relentlessly pummeled Obama and Clinton. Vice President Joe Biden described Trump as a man who confuses bluster with strength and someone who doesn't have a clue about the middle class. A president of resurgent popularity, Obama offered a counterpoint to the near-apocalyptic portrait of the country on display during last week's Republican National Convention in Cleveland, where Trump accepted the GOP presidential nomination. "The America I know is full of courage and optimism and ingenuity. The America I know is decent and generous," the president said. He nodded toward the country's worries and the trauma of recent tragedies. "We've still got a lot of work to do," the president said. "More work to do for every American still in need of a good job or a raise, paid leave or a decent retirement, for every child who needs a sturdier ladder out of poverty, or a world-class education. For everyone who hasn't yet felt the progress of the past 7.5 years, we need to keep making our streets safer and our criminal justice system fairer, our homeland more secure, our world more peaceful and sustainable for the next generation. We're not done perfecting our union or living up to our founding creed that all of us are created equal and free in the eyes of God. And here's Jack.
Well, one more item related to the campaign. Hillary Clinton is planning a visit to Omaha on Monday, according to her campaign spokesman. He said Hillary Clinton will campaign in Omaha, where she will discuss her commitment to building an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top, end quote. No details of the visit have been released, but it's reasonable to expect that Clinton's stop in Omaha would include public campaigning and private fundraising elements. That was the game plan when she came through town in December. That visit included a public rally and a fundraiser with Omaha investor Warren Buffett. Her stop in Nebraska next week is a sign that Democrats will try to pick up an electoral vote in the state by winning the Omaha-based 2nd District. Marlon Marshall, a Clinton campaign official, told Nebraska delegates at the national convention this week, quote, "We are campaigning in Nebraska for your congressional district." Nebraska is one of 2 states that split their electoral votes rather than awarding them on a winner-take-all basis. Barack Obama won the 2nd District in 2008, which gave him one of Nebraska's 5 electoral votes. It was the first time a Democratic candidate won an electoral vote in Nebraska since President Lyndon Johnson swept the state in 1964. Former First Lady Clinton, who has also been a U.S. Senator and Secretary of State, last appeared in Omaha for a December 16th rally with Buffett. She spoke to more than 800 people at Sokol Auditorium during her campaign for the nomination.
Thank you, Jack. For would-be Reagan assassin, freedom only days away. From Washington, for the past decade, the man who shot President Ronald Reagan has quietly spent a growing number of his days living with his 90-year-old mother in a gated community in Williamsburg, Virginia. On Wednesday, a judge finalized John Hinckley Jr.'s transition to freedom, ordering that Hinckley can permanently leave the psychiatric hospital where he has been confined after the assassination attempt. The order, which cannot be appealed, has been in the works for years, despite opposition by prosecutors who sought numerous restrictions on Hinckley's freedom, most of which were agreed to by Judge Paul Friedman. Hinckley could leave St. Elizabeth's Hospital as early as August the 5th. Hinckley, now age 61, was found not guilty by reason of insanity in the March 30th, 1981 shooting, fueled by his obsession with the movie Taxi Driver and its teenage star Jodie Foster. He used a pawn shop revolver to fire 6 shots at Reagan, the president's aides, and his protective detail outside a Washington hotel, wounding the president and 3 others. Doctors have said for many years that Hinckley's mental illness was in remission, and Friedman concurred in his ruling. Hinckley was a profoundly troubled 25-year-old young man when he shot Reagan, the judge wrote, but has not exhibited symptoms of major depression or psychotic disorder for more than 27 years. Mr. Hinckley, by all accounts, has shown no signs of psychotic symptoms, delusional thinking, or any violent tendencies, Friedman wrote. The court finds that Mr. Hinckley has received the maximum benefits possible in the inpatient setting and that inpatient treatment is no longer clinically warranted or beneficial. Hinckley was first allowed to leave St. Elizabeth in 2003 to visit his parents in Washington, and he began staying with them at their Williamsburg home overlooking a golf course in 2006. For the past 2+ years, he has been allowed to spend 17 days a month with his mother. Here's Jack.
Hey, Bill. From Baltimore, more than a year after a black man suffered a broken neck in a police van, the effort to hold 6 officers criminally responsible for his death collapsed yesterday when the city dropped all charges in the case. A day before another trial was to begin, prosecutors dismissed charges against 3 remaining officers, blaming police for a biased investigation that failed to produce a single conviction of the death of Freddie Gray. The 25-year-old Gray was fatally injured in April of 2015 while he was handcuffed and shackled, but left otherwise unrestrained in the back of the van. His death added fuel to the growing Black Lives Matter movement and set off massive protests and led to the city's worst riots in decades. Prosecutors suffered blow after crippling blow in the courtroom. A judge acquitted 3 other officers, including the van driver who prosecutors considered the most responsible, and another officer who was the highest ranking of the group. A mistrial was declared for a 4th officer after a jury deadlocked. Authorities had planned to retry him. The case took shape soon after the rioting when Democrat State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby confidently announced the charges atop a sweeping staircase across from City Hall. Yesterday, she was fiery and indignant as she spoke across the street from the public housing complex where Gray was arrested. She angrily blamed the outcome on an uncooperative police department and a broken criminal justice system. Prosecutors suffered significant setbacks in nearly every trial presented before Circuit Judge Barry Williams. At several points, the judge berated them for failing to turn over evidence to the officers' attorneys. Last year, Gray's family received a $6.4 million settlement from the city. The Gray case never fit neatly into the narrative of white authorities imposing unfair justice on minorities. 3 of the officers who were charged are white, 3 are black. The victim, the judge, the top prosecutor, and the mayor are all African Americans. At the time of Gray's death, so was the police chief. Bill?
Thank you, Jack. The time is 10:12. To reverse damage of sitting, take a brisk hour-long walk. From London. If you spend all day sitting on your rear end, then you might want to schedule some time for a brisk walk. Just make sure you can spare at least an hour. That sounds like a lot to me. Scientists analyzing data from more than 1 million people found that it takes about 60 to 75 minutes of moderate intensity exercise to undo the damage of sitting for at least 8 hours a day. Not exercising and sitting all day is as dangerous as being obese or smoking, they found. And the added risk of parking yourself in front of a TV for 5 hours or more a day after sitting at the office is so high, even the hour of exercise is not enough to reverse the damage. We cannot stress enough the importance of getting exercise, whether it's getting out for a walk at lunchtime, going for a run in the morning, or cycling to work, said Ulf Ekelund of the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences in Norway, one of the study authors, in a statement. It has long been suspected that sitting a lot at work or at home is not healthy. Previous studies have found that prolonged sitting can raise the chances of heart disease, various cancers, and an earlier death. In the new research, experts combed through 13 papers with data on factors including how long people spend sitting, their physical activity levels, and their TV watching habits. The majority of studies included people older than the age of 45. All except one were done in the US, Western Europe, and Australia. Researchers found that the people with the highest levels of moderate physical activity, 60 to 75 minutes daily, erased the higher risk of death linked to being seated for more than 8 hours a day. But even that exercise regime was not enough to counter the hazards of also watching more than 5 hours of TV a day. The paper was published on Online Wednesday in the journal Lancet. Here's Jack.
Turning south of the border to Venezuela, times are really tough down there. Thousands of Venezuelans have streamed across the border with Colombia to buy goods that are in really short supply in that country. As the economy collapses under the weight of the world's highest inflation rate and chronic mismanagement by the socialist government, that has produced shortages of everything from diapers to milk. More than 120,000 Venezuelans recently crossed the border, which was briefly reopened by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro after he had ordered it closed last August. The Venezuelan government insists that the claims of spreading hunger are part of a smear campaign by the opposition. However, the people are still doing without. Carlos Luna, president of the Cucuta Chamber of Commerce, said the surge of Venezuelan shoppers this month in Colombia was a burst of business for Colombian vendors, but he says that's not the kind of border we want. Venezuela's military deployment at the border has slowed but not stopped the flow of goods into Colombia. Just a few hundred yards upriver from the official crossing, Venezuelans wade through the shallow river in plain sight of armed Venezuelan bodyguards. The guards will look the other way for a small bribe, according to residents. At the wholesale market in central Cucuta, huge piles of containers of powdered milk stamped with the Venezuelan government's label were being unloaded in broad daylight. Carolina Huguera, who runs a money-changing operation at the border, noted how the economic crisis in Venezuela had altered the long-time dynamic between the neighboring nations. She said that for as long as she could remember, Venezuela was the rich country and Colombia was poor. People went there to find jobs. Now it's the other way around. Bill?
Thank you, Jack. Sorry. Pope says the world's at war, urges Europe to greet refugees. From Krakow, Poland. Sorry. Pope Francis, deeply saddened by the slaying of an elderly priest during Mass in a church in the French countryside, warned grimly Wednesday that the world is at war, but cautioned against labeling it a war among religions. At the start of his first ever trip to Eastern Europe, where anti-immigrant sentiments have been rising, he also encouraged Europe to welcome refugees from war, hunger, and religious persecution, and called for courage and compassion. Francis is celebrating World Youth Day in Poland, where the conservative government has shut the doors to migrants, and many fear that accepting Muslim refugees would threaten the nation's security and its Catholic identity. As he started the 5-day trip, he told an audience of Poland's president, diplomats, and other dignitaries that what is needed is a spirit of readiness to welcome those fleeing from wars and hunger, and solidarity with those deprived of their fundamental rights, including the right to profess one's faith in freedom and safety. While the speech had in mind the hundreds of thousands of migrants fleeing Syria, Iraq, and other Mideast countries, as well as impoverished nations in Africa, his reference to practicing one's faith in safety could also be seen as an allusion to the slaying of the 85-year-old French priest by two extremists in Normandy on Tuesday. The murder compounded security fears surrounding Francis's trip, which were already high due to a string of violent attacks in France and Germany. Polish officials say they have deployed tens of thousands of security officials to cover the event. Francis spoke to reporters as he flew from Rome to Krakow. Asking about the slaying of the priest, Francis replied, "It is war. We don't have to be afraid to say this." He then sought to avoid any misunderstanding of his definition of war. "I only want to clarify that when I speak of war, I am really speaking of war," he said, "a war of interest for money, resources, dominion of peoples. I am not speaking of a war of religions. Religions don't want war. The others want war," he added. Here's Jack.
Thanks, Bill. Well, one more brief national item from Chicago. President Obama's presidential library will be built in a park on Chicago's south side along the shores of Lake Michigan. It's only a short walk from the University of Chicago, where Obama once taught. The Barack Obama Foundation decided to build the library in Jackson Park near the university, according to a person who has been briefed on the selection. The park was chosen over nearby Washington Park, which also was proposed by the university where Obama taught constitutional law as he embarked on a political career that led him to the White House. Bill?
Thank you, Jack. Do you have another article there?
Yes.
Thank you.
From Madison, Wisconsin, a Wisconsin State Appeals Court has ruled that two girls accused of trying to kill their classmate in an attempt to please the fictional horror character Slender Man should be tried as adults. Investigators say the girls, who were 12 at the time of the attack in 2014, plotted for months before luring their classmates into some woods after a birthday sleepover and repeatedly stabbing her. The victim, who was also 12, was found along a road bleeding from 19 stab wounds that nearly killed her. She has since recovered and returned to school. The girls have been charged with attempted first-degree intentional homicide, and if convicted, could go to prison for up to 65 years. As juveniles, they could be incarcerated for up to 3 years and then supervised until age 18.
Thank you so much, Jeff. From the Lincoln Journal-Star and the legislature, LaVon Crosby, beloved former state senator, dies at the age of 92. LaVon Crosby had a knack for leaving a positive impression as she went about her business as a politician, art supporter, and friend to children in need. She didn't have to get in anyone's face to accomplish what she wanted. She did it with subtle suggestions and by garnering respect with conscientious and diligent daily way of being, family, friends, and co-workers, said. Crosby died Wednesday at the age of 92. She was a wife, mother, supporter of the arts, musician, state lawmaker, political staffer, and community volunteer. For me, she was a stellar example to live by, said her youngest son, Fred Stewart. I'm inordinately proud of everything that she has achieved. She was married to former Nebraska Governor Bob Crosby in 1971 after both were widowed. Between them, they parented 6 children. Lincoln Monsignor Clarence Crowley had set them up to go on a date, said her son, Mike Stewart. Bob Crosby picked her up in an Oldsmobile 88, making a big impression on her sons. We got all dressed up and shoved her out the door, he said. They hit it off right off and never looked back. Throughout her life, Tim and Mike Stewart said their mother instilled perspective, the ability to stay above the fray, and to not shy away from a passionate defense of her beliefs. As an Irish Catholic mother, she was strict but tender-hearted, they said. She described herself as a hard-headed, soft-hearted conservative. Someone else once called her a Republican with a heart, one without a mean-spirited bone in her body. Crosby was raised in a family of Democrats, but joined the young Republicans because they asked her first, she once said. She was one of the few people, one would suppose, who was able to wring a 2-minute public apology out of a conservative talk show host, Rush Limbaugh, after he called her a liberal and a member of an outraged women's group, neither of which were true. Limbaugh had picked up inaccurate information on the artist who painted murals on the Capitol walls when in 1993, she encouraged him to portray women accurately and not just in subservient roles in those murals, because women are the backbone of society, she said. Encouragement and subtle influence was her way, Tim Stewart said. It worked for him when, after graduating from college and not knowing what to do with his life other than play guitar in a rock and roll band in bars, she softly suggested, have you thought about Washington, D.C.? He started working for Congresswoman Virginia Smith at the age of 25 and stayed on Capitol Hill for 10 years. I owe a lot to little moments like that, he said. Crosby worked for a time in Nebraska Senator Roman Ruska's Washington, D.C. office, but when her husband, Les Stewart, was dying in 1970, the family returned to Nebraska, transferring to Ruska's Omaha office. Crosby ran for a seat in the legislature in Southeast Lincoln's District 29 in 1980, but was defeated by incumbent Shirley Marsh. When Marsh decided not to run in 1988, Crosby ran again and won. Senator Ernie Chambers, who served with Crosby for 12 years in the legislature, said he couldn't think of anyone there he thought so much of and got along with so well. That's despite their disagreement on the issue of abortion. Crosby was a devout Catholic. Here's Jack.
Thank you, Bill. Probably the main story in Omaha in the last few days has been that explosion in Benson with a gas-filled home. Some new details have emerged, and today's story says as natural gas filled that home for 2 days, a voicemail waited on Clara Bender Reinhardt's work cell phone, alerting her to the potential danger. But her relatives and friends may never know whether she heard that message. The property inspector was killed midday Monday when the gas ignited, exploding as she stood in the kitchen. Officials have concluded that her death was the result of an accident. Natural gas leaking from the line of a disconnected clothes dryer was the cause of the blast that occurred about 12:15 p.m. on Monday, according to Omaha fire officials. The explosion leveled the home at 3858 North 65th Street and caused severe damage to others. The 30-year-old Bender Reinhardt, who was an employee of Certified Property Management, had been inspecting her fourth home Monday. The Omaha Fire Department completed its investigation yesterday and released a timeline that started with an evicted tenant moving out and ended with the explosion. On Saturday, Kawana Toussaint moved out of the house with help from friends, according to fire officials. They said a clothes dryer was one of the last items removed. The dryer was disconnected from the gas line, but the gas line was not shut off, allowing gas to leak into the home. Later Saturday, two friends of Toussaint went back to the home to grab a couple of items and told Toussaint that they had smelled natural gas. Toussaint then left a voicemail on Bender Reinhardt's work cell phone late Saturday, but investigators don't know if she ever heard it. Fire investigators found her phone, and Omaha police listened to Toussaint's voicemail. Chief Deputy Douglas County Attorney Brenda Beadle said that because authorities ruled the explosion to be an accident, no charges would be filed. Mark McDonald, who is president of Nat Gas Consulting in Boston, which investigates natural gas explosions, said those removing the dryer most likely would have known the gas was leaking. He said, quote, "Once you disconnect the gas line, you're going to know it. It's going to smell and it's going to make a hissing sound." Although he's not directly involved in the investigation and offered an analysis based on dozens of gas explosion cases his company has investigated, he added, "You basically have a bomb sitting there." Jeremy Aspen, the president of the management company, said he and another co-worker are sure that Bender Reinhardt knew to call Metropolitan Utilities District if she smelled gas. Bender Reinhardt's husband, Jake Reinhardt, said, quote, "This was an accident and our family is not angry and we don't blame anybody for this situation, as tragic as it is. It just happens. I only hope that we can all learn from this going forward, not only being more cautious in daily routines, but also in the procedures and steps taken to ensure the safety of employees and people we serve." Back to Bill.
Thank you, Jack. In business, tone suggests rate hikes soon. Robust hiring, stable world economy, open path on interest rates from Washington. The Federal Reserve said Wednesday that near-term risks to the U.S. economy have diminished, reviving the prospect that it will resume raising interest rates as soon as September. The Fed noted that the U.S. job market has rebounded with robust hiring in June after a deep slump in May. At the same time, the Fed said in a statement after its latest policy meeting that it plans to closely monitor global economic threats and financial development to ensure that they don't slow the economy. The Fed seemed to be referring in particular to Britain's vote last month to leave the European Union, a move that poses risks for the rest of Europe and to the global economy. The central bank gave no specific timetable for when it might resume the rate hikes. It began in December when it raised its benchmark rate from a record low. But some analysts who had doubted that the Fed would be ready to raise rates as soon as September said Wednesday's statement appeared to revive that possibility. Brian Bethune, an economics professor at Tufts University, said he still thought that the Fed would wait until December before raising rates, but that a September move was possible if hiring remained strong and the global economy and markets remained stable. Greg McBride, chief financial analyst at Bankrate.com, noted that the Fed gave a very upbeat assessment of the U.S. economy, which is the first step toward prepping markets for another rate hike. Analysts said the next important signal of the Fed's thinking could come when Chair Janet Yellen speaks at an annual central bank conference in late August in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. The decision to leave its key rate unchanged in a range of 0.25% to 0.5% was approved on a 9-to-1 vote. Esther George, the president of the Fed's Kansas City Regional Bank, dissented for the third time this year, arguing for an immediate quarter-point rate hike. Here's Jack, and the time is 10:30.
Well, former Bellevue Councilman Chuck Frederick is an old man who was making a joke when he touched a woman's breasts at a Bellevue pool hall, according to his lawyer. Sarpy County prosecutors, however, said it was sexual assault and charged the former councilman and perennial mayoral candidate with 2 misdemeanors. At the conclusion of a 2-day trial in Sarpy County Court yesterday, the jury of 5 women and 1 man found that the 82-year-old Frederick was not guilty of third-degree sexual assault, but was guilty of disturbing the peace. He will be sentenced on that charge September 29th and faces up to 90 days in jail and a $500 fine. Frederick was elected to the Bellevue City Council in 1998 and gave up the seat in 2002 to run for mayor. He speaks at every city council meeting. Both sides agreed that Frederick touched the woman's breasts, but argued about whether it fit the definition of third-degree sexual assault. According to facts presented by the prosecutors, Frederick and the woman were playing poker November 7th at the Crook, which is at 908 Fort Crook Road in Bellevue. They went outside to the smoking patio, and Frederick asked the woman if she wanted to hear a joke, and she agreed. It was during the telling of the joke that prosecutors said Frederick touched the woman's breasts and then laughed. The woman testified that she laughed uncomfortably after it happened and then filed a police report a week later. And Frederick is seen in a video shown in court telling a Bellevue police detective, quote, "I guess I'm just a dirty old man," end quote. James Martin Davis, Frederick's attorney, said his client might have been crude, lewd, and rude, but he did not commit a crime. He said they're trying to take a joke and turning it into sexual misconduct. After the verdict, Frederick said the joke was a mistake, and he was sorry that he misjudged how the woman would take it. Sarpy County Deputy Attorney Ben Perlman said he thought the jury understood what Frederick did was wrong. He said he was disappointed that they did not find Frederick guilty on the sexual assault charge, but was pleased that they returned a guilty verdict on disturbing the peace charge.
Thank you, Jack. From the Lincoln Journal-Star, here is Cindy Lang Kubik's column, and she says, a young mom living with stage 4 cancer. Abby Schnell remembers texting a friend about her colonoscopy. "I'll be fine," she wrote. "This is what old people go through." And Abby was young. She just had a baby. Remy was 2 weeks old. Her son, Erezia, was not quite 2. The 25-year-old woke from the procedure that day in 2012 to news that she never expected. The blood in her stools wasn't caused by hemorrhoids after all. She had stage 4 colon cancer. Abby had chemo and radiation and surgery to remove her rectum and 13 inches of her colon. She had a permanent colostomy. She had more chemo. She's still having chemo, a maintenance drug and not a cure, after discovering 2 years ago that the cancer had spread to her lungs. It's Tuesday, the day before Abby's every other week chemo, a 3-hour appointment that will leave her down for days, which means she'll work long hours early in the week from home in her job in an insurance underwriting so she doesn't get behind, and she'll plan meals ahead so her boys can still eat well. And on Sunday, she'll play sand volleyball at Spikes with her husband, Adam, like always. She'll be good. She'll be Abby. That's her goal, to live her life. She wrote about that in a third-person essay last year. Abby wants to provide the most normal life she can for her boys while she is still here, and that is one reason she continues to work and fight. She sent her story to the Colon Club, a nonprofit focused on colon cancer patients younger than 50 with one goal: to educate as many people as possible as early as possible. For 10 years, the organization had published the Colander, like calendar, a calendar featuring 12 colorectal cancer patients, all younger than 50 at their diagnosis. The calendars showed the faces and scars of survivors, taking away the stigma, said Krista Wilson, president of the Colon Club's board of directors. But they wanted to do more, and in 2015, began publishing in-depth stories of survivors in an annual magazine, Colander 2.0. 12 4-page spreads with plenty of photos and the hard details of life with colon cancer. Abby got a phone call this spring telling her that she'd been selected, and in June she was placed on a plane to Nashville. It was easy to choose the young mom from Nebraska, Krista says. She is amazing. People can connect with Abby by looking at the way she handles things and seeing there is hope for me. Abby spent 5 days with 11 other colon cancer survivors at a retreat in the woods outside the city. It's really weird. The bond we already had, even though we were strangers. It felt like an instant brotherhood. She pauses, and sisterhood. It was her first time away from her son, she says, from the living room of a cozy ranch with a garden out back in the middle of Lincoln. Arisha, age 5, is on the carpet playing with his Happy Meal toys. Remy, age 3, is watching YouTube videos. The two boys who left to wrestle with their dad, who's home from work and on the couch with his family. And Abby looks healthy. She looks happy. She calls herself the momager of the household. She calls Adam, the man she met while she was a junior at Southwest High School, her researcher and her rock. His wife is the strong one, Adam says, though the whole thing it's not got her down. Here's Jack.
Well, this weekend's Defenders of Freedom open house and air show at Offutt Air Force Base will honor 3 big anniversaries for Offutt's 55th wing. It's been 75 years since the unit was activated as the 55th Pursuit Group, 50 years since it moved to Offutt, and 25 years of continuous deployment to the Middle East. The air show will be held Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and the spectacular Air Force Thunderbirds are the headliners, but they're far from the only act. Also performing will be a team of Super Hornet fighters from the Navy's replacement squadron at Naval Air Station in Lemoore, California. There will be a flyby of Air Force RC-135 and E-4B aircraft, which are based at Offutt. And Major James Lease, the air show director, said fans of vintage aircraft will get to see first a newly restored MiG fighter jet, a special all-weather version of that jet, which was built in the 1960s, flown in Korea and in Vietnam. Lee said it has never performed at a military air show in the United States. Other classic aircraft flying over Offutt this weekend will include the P-51 Mustang from World War II, the Tora 101, a replica of a Japanese Zero fighter of the type used during the Pearl Harbor attack, and a Navy trainer aircraft from the 1940s. Numerous other military airplanes will not fly during the show, but they will be on static display, and some will be open for tours. For those who drive, shuttle service will be offered to 5 remote locations, beginning at 8:45 a.m. The locations are South Roads Technology Center at Fort Cook and Childs Road, Bellevue University at Harville and Herman Drives, Bellevue East High School, Harville Drive and Lincoln Road, Bellevue West High School, South 15th Street and Thurston Drive, and Offutt Air Force Base via the Bellevue Gate.
Thank you, Jack. From the Journal-Star, Government and Politics. What is the Nebraska Brand Committee? The Nebraska Brand Committee is an independent state agency based in Alliance that inspects cattle brands, keeps brand records, and investigates cases of missing or stolen livestock. A state auditor's report released Tuesday roundly criticized the committee's management and record keeping. The audit results were featured in an article in Wednesday's Journal-Star. Here is a more detailed look at the Brand Committee. Created in 1941, its mission is to guard against cattle rustling, particularly in sparsely populated rangeland areas. With few exceptions, virtually all sales of beef cattle in 48 of Nebraska's 93 counties must be approved by one of the committee's inspectors who check that sellers have proof of ownership. The committee keeps a record of Nebraska's thousands of registered cattle brands and will also inspect livestock sales in a handful of other counties upon request. Dozens of full-time and part-time inspectors comprise the bulk of the committee's staff. The committee also works statewide to investigate reports of stolen cattle. It employs 4 investigators who are certified law enforcement officers, including the committee's executive director. A handful of administrative employees, including the director and assistant director, manage the committee's operation from headquarters in Alliance. In all, according to the Nebraska Auditor of Public Accounts, as of May 31st, the committee had 51 full-time employees and 48 part-time inspectors. Like dozens of other regulatory and promotional agencies within the state government, the Nebraska Brand Committee is not under the governor's direct control and does not rely on the state's mainline budget for its funding. It operates using money from application and inspection fees. Its executive director is overseen by a 5-member board, each appointed to 4-year terms by the governor. 4 members must be active in the cattle industry. State law also requires representatives of the Secretary of State's office and Nebraska Department of Agriculture to serve as non-voting members of the Brand Committee Board. And that's what Nebraska Brand is. Here's Jack.
Well, here's a little offbeat kind of story from Blair. A Blair Police Department dog handler is suing the city, claiming he's entitled to overtime for taking care of his assigned dog at home during off-duty hours. The suit was filed July 7th in federal court by Sergeant Travis Lyon, who's been a member of the department since 1999 and a dog handler since 2004. The suit says that being a dog handler requires Lyon to work with Duke, a Belgian Malinois, beyond the typical work week. Besides working with Duke while on duty, he must train, feed, water, groom, walk, and exercise the dog at home, his suit says. It demands compensation for his work with interest for the past 3 years, which is the statute of limitation for such lawsuits. Blair Police Chief Joseph Lager declined to comment, and City Attorney Adam Tripp referred questions to Attorney Colin Moose in Lincoln, who declined to comment also. The city has not filed a response to the suit. Lyon referred most questions to his attorney, Gary Young of Lincoln, and he said his client currently receives no compensation for the off-duty time for care of Duke. The city's pay plan gives regular officers an hourly bump if they are dog handlers, as much as 73 cents per hour, but it does not allow for sergeants to receive the extra compensation. When Lyon was promoted in 2012, he continued to care for Duke, but lost the boost in pay. But Young said even that is not enough. As an hourly employee, he said his client should get overtime pay for work performed outside his regular 80 hours per 2 weeks. Young said there's no longer any premium paid for that responsibility, and he has to work overtime doing it. The city does pay for parts of the dog's care, including veterinary bills, toys, food, and water. Dog handlers in other departments receive a variety of extra pay. Omaha Police Department dog handlers get a 3% pay boost, plus 30 minutes of regular pay per workday for taking care of the animal, but no overtime. Douglas County Sheriff's Office dog handlers are compensated with an additional 6 hours per week of regular pay, and the Sarpy County Sheriff's Office gives handlers on-duty time to care for the animals and 30 minutes of overtime on non-work days. They also get a 3% pay boost. And here's Bill.
Thank you, Jack. The time is 10:43. We have quite a number of deaths and funerals, particularly in the Lincoln Journal-Star. So we'll start early and see how that works. The first is Peg Baronic of Lincoln, passed away July 12th. Memorials to the ARC of Lincoln. A celebration of Peg's life will be held at 11 a.m. on Saturday, July 30th at the First Plymouth Congregational Church in Lincoln. Brophy, Loretta May, maiden name and married name Campbell Butler, and Brophy, Loretta Brophy, age 91 of Ashland, died July 26, born September 1924 in Ashland. Memorials are suggested to the family for future designation, and Marcy Svoboda is the funeral home in Ashland, Marcy Chapel. Del Marie, D-E-M-A-R-E-E, Beverly J. Demarie, age 81 of Lincoln, passed away July 23rd, and that's Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Egger, Gerald R. Egger, age 97 of rural Douglas, died July 26th. Let's see here. Zink Fox Funeral Home of Sterling is handling the arrangements. Ewing, Dorothy May Ewing, age 99 of Lincoln, passed away July 25th, born May 1917 in Smithfield. Let's see. Donations to Donor's Choice and the funeral home is Roper and Sons. Fishwood, Ruth Fishwood of Humboldt, born April 1927, passed away July 25th, age 89. Greaves, Greaves, George A. Greaves, age 61, of Lincoln, died July 23rd. George was born in November 1954 in Broken Bow. And that's Bethuras Mazer and Love Funeral Home, Lincoln. Haga, H-A-G-A, Terry Jo Haga, age 52, of Lincoln, passed away July 26th, born February 1964 in Canton, South Dakota. Memorials to the family and the funeral home is Roper and Sons. Hakenkamp, Richard Lee Hakenkamp, age 79, of Lincoln, passed away July 26th, born May 1937 in McCook. Memorials to the St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, to the St. Joseph Catholic Church, and for masses, the funeral home is Bethuras Mazer and Love Funeral Home, Lincoln. Harpster, Harold Harpster, age 93, passed away July 11th. That's Lincoln Memorial Park. Heinke, H-E-I-N-K-E, and Irene Heinke, and her maiden name was Casbohm, of Syracuse, age 90, died July 25th. She was born March 1926. Arrangements, Fusselman Allen Harvey Funeral Home, Syracuse, and in lieu of flowers, memorials are suggested to the Syracuse United Methodist Church Building Fund. Hyatt Brink, H-I-E-T-B-R-I-N-K. Russell A. Hyatt Brink, age 77, passed away July 26th. He was a veteran in the United States Navy. Memorial contributions can be made to the Capital Humane Society, and the funeral home is Roper and Sons. Hopkins, Sarah L. Lintz Hopkins, age 50, of Lincoln, passed away July 26th. Services will be at 11 a.m. Saturday, July 30th at Redeemer Lutheran Church. Johnson, June Grace Johnson, age 77, of Lincoln, born June 1939, passed away July 25th, age 80. Johnson, Harland H. Johnson, age 82, of Lincoln, passed away July 25th, born August 1933 on a farm in rural Cortland, Kansas. Memorials in lieu of flowers to the Bethany Christian Church, Nebraska Sports Council, which is Cornhusker Games, or the YMCA Camp Kentucky, and Roper and Sons is handling. Jones, Buford W. Jones, born December 1927 in Winter, South Dakota, died July 26th, age 88. Memorials to the First Plymouth Congregational Church and the funeral home, Roper and Sons. Lottman, L-O-T-T-M-A-N, Larry G. Lottman, age 69, of Wymore, passed away July 25th. He was a veteran of the United States Navy. And let's see, that's Laughlin Hevitt Funeral Home, Wymore. Miller, Glenn A. Miller of Crete, passed away July 25th. Navratil, April Rose Navratil, passed away July 26th. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the family to be designated at a later time. Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home is handling. Newhar, I guess, N-E-U-J-A-H-R, I hope that's right. Gary W. Newhar, age 72, of Gresham, died July 26th. He was born April 1944 in Stromsburg. He served in the National Guard. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be directed to the wishes of the family, and McCown Funeral Home, Columbus, is handling. Nolly, N-O-L-L-E-Y. Gerald L., they called him Jerry Nolly, age 77, of Lincoln, passed away July 26th. Jerry was born April 1939 in Cedarville, Ohio, retired United States Air Force veteran. Memorials to Tabitha Foundation, Hospice, or American Cancer Society, and Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home is listed. Pearson, Lawrence Bernard, they called him Bud Pearson, age 91, formerly of Thedford, died July 21st. Bud was born July 1925 in Aurora. Memorials are to the Bethel Assembly of God Church, to Hillcrest Cemetery of Thedford, or Thedford Fire Department Building Fund. Arnold and Mullen Funeral Homes is in charge of the arrangement. Poyar, P-O-J-A-R, Joseph H. Poyar, age 76, of Davie, formerly of Lincoln, passed away July 7th. Services 11 a.m. July 30th at the First Evangelical Covenant Church in Lincoln. Rezik, R-E-Z-E-K, Antoinette Marie Rezik, age 94, of Lincoln, died July 25th, born December 1921 on a farm near Valparaiso. Memorials to Blessed Sacrament Catholic Church and Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home is handling. Ritchie, R-I-T-C-H-I-E, Sandra M. Ritchie, and maiden name Steve, age 71 of Crete, passed away July 25th, born June 1945. Funeral services entrusted to Zabka Funeral Home, Seward, and memorials to the Sandy Ritchie family for future designation. Sire, S-E-I-E-R, Eugene H., they called him Gene Sire, age 93 of Grand Island, died July 25th. Livingston Sonderman Funeral Home, Grand Island is listed. Stearns, Priscilla Stearns, age 92 of Lincoln, excuse me, passed away July 27th. Services are pending with Rover & Sons Funeral Services. Talley, David R. Talley, age 65 of Lincoln, passed away July 24th. That's Aspen Aftercare. Troutman, Captain Darrell Clinton Troutman, United States Navy, retired, age 80 of Lincoln, passed away July 26th. And that's Aspen Aftercare. Vales, Emma J. Vales, age 99 of Wilbur, died July 26th. Kunkel Funeral Home is handling the arrangement. Velker, V-O-E-L-K-E-R, Rosina L. Velker, age 97 of Lincoln, passed away July 23rd. Born August 1918 in Walworth. Memorials may be given to the Sacred Heart Church, and Metcalf Funeral Services is listed. And the last is Z-O-Z, Zaz. Clara F. Zaz, age 97 of Lincoln, died July 26th. Memorials to St. Mary's Catholic Church in Lincoln. The Thursday Mazer and Love Funeral Home is handling. Those are the deaths and funerals in the Lincoln Journal-Star.
And turning to the obituary notices in the World Herald, we begin with Allen, Robert Allen Jr., and West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home is handling arrangements. He was 73 years old. Axiotis, I hope that's right, Petros Axiotis, age 97, a master tailor in Omaha. Memorials to St. John's Greek Orthodox Church or the Omaha Police Department, Heafy Hoffman Dwark and Cutler Bel Air Chapel in charge. Bender Reinhardt, Clara Bender Reinhardt, age 30. She was the young woman killed in that explosion on Monday. A memorial service will be held Friday at Corisco Larkin Staskowitz Funeral Home. Bernhagen, Catherine Bernhagen, age 104. Memorials to the Bethany Lutheran Church or Streams of Life. Reichmuth Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Boschult, Dr. Carl Boschult. He was practiced medicine in Omaha as an anesthesiologist. West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Cable, Laurie Cable, age 59. John A. Gentleman, Mortuaries and Crematory, Pacific Street Chapel is in charge. Clark, Bill Clark, age 87 of Elkhorn. Memorials to Our Savior's Baptist Church. Reichmuth Funeral Home is in charge, and he was a veteran. Dean, Gary Dean, age 75. Bethany Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Farwell, Barbara Farwell, age 82 of Valley. Memorials to the Valley Rescue Squad or the American Heart Association. Reichmuth Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Hahn, Luella Hahn, age 91. Memorials are suggested to the St. Patrick Catholic Church Choir or the Lakeside Scholarship Fund. And John E. Gentleman Mortuaries and Crematory Pacific Street Chapel is in charge. Handy, Madeline Handy, age 93. Memorials to the family. Crosby, Burkett, Swanson, Golden, Colonial Chapel, handling arrangements. Havoc, Claude Havoc Jr., age 72. He was a veteran of the Army National Guard. And no memorials listed. Heafy Hoffman Dwara Cutler Bel Air Chapel, handling arrangements. Helms, Leona Helms, Helms, age 93. Efi Hoffman Dwara Cutler Bel Air Chapel in charge. Husebo, I hope that's right, Husebo, Judith Husebo, age 69. Paul Funeral Home and Crematory in Washington, North Carolina is handling arrangements. Johnson, Alice Johnson, age 78 of Fremont. Dugan Funeral Home of Fremont is handling arrangements. Lafon, Kenneth Lafon, that's Lafon, age 81. And Hefe Hoffman Dwara Cutler Bel Air Chapel in charge. In lieu of flowers, memorials may go to the Child Saving Institute or Faith Christian Church. Larkin, Susan Larkin, age 58. And Harbor Cremation Society is handling arrangements. Mackey, Leslie Mackey, age 50 of Council Bluffs. Memorials may be directed to the family. Hoya Kilnoski Funeral Home and Crematory is handling arrangements. Manard, Virginia Manard, age 93. Memorials to St. Luke's Evangelical Lutheran Church. Hefe Hoffman Dwara Cutler Bel Air Chapel handling arrangements. Manchester, Kay Manchester, age 91. Memorials to the Josie Harper Hospice House or Shriners Hospital for Children. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries and Crematory, Pacific Street Chapel in charge. Medinger, Ruth Medinger, no age is given. Crosby Burkett Swanson Golden Colonial Chapel handling arrangements. Parks, David Parks, age 62. Carisco Larkin Staskowitz Funeral Home handling arrangements. Pigman, Michael Pigman, age 54. Roeder Mortuary's 108th Street Chapel is in charge. Schlesinger, Louise Schlesinger, age 90. Memorials to the Nebraska Humane Society, Roeder Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel handling arrangements. Sheldon-Cologne, that's K-O-L-O-E-N, Marianne Sheldon Cologne. She was 96. And memorials may go to the Benson Baptist Church, Bremen Mortuary, Southwest Chapel in charge. Smalley's, John Smalley's, S-M-A-I-L-Y-S, age 78. Complete notice later, Bethany Funeral Home handling arrangements. Thomas, Anthony Thomas, and Thomas Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Travis, James Travis, age 70. Anthony Thomas was 58, by the way. James Travis, age 70. A Good Shepherd Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Voss Sr., Frederick J. Voss Sr., age 71. Forest Lawn Funeral Home and Crematory is handling arrangements. Waters, Virginia Waters, age 66. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries and Crematory, Pacific Street Chapel in charge. Wells, Alberta Wells, age 59. Roeder Mortuary Ames Chapel is in charge. Whitehill, Patricia Whitehill, age 66. Memorials to the family, Hefe Hoffman Dwara Cutler Bel Air Chapel in charge. And lastly, Youngblood, Annette Youngblood, age 74. Bremen Mortuary 72nd Street Chapel is in charge. And as, excuse me?
Go ahead, Jack.
As usual, we would like to say that listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska, 68152. And thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
Jack and I will be right back. We hope you will be too. Here's Paul.
Very much, Bill Everhart and Jack Martin for reading the first hour.
Yesterday's date somehow screwed up my brain.
Which recorded
Got the July 26th instead of July 20, whatever.
Oh, the Blood Journal story.
Yeah.
I've run into that before too. I think you can fix it.
Welcome, man.
For Thursday, July 28th, potato crusted spinach, scalloped potatoes, parsley carrots, multi-grain bread with margarine, peanut butter cookies, and a pint of 1% milk.
Thank you very much, Ann Pelican, for reading the home delivery menu for us today. Now, here is Pulse of the Planet. Might it be possible to create something like a periodic table for the human mind? I'm Jim Metzner, and this is the Pulse of the Planet. When you're sitting here looking me in the eye and measuring me up, what exactly do you see? And the answer is nothing.
I just went up there to hit that, and then I went back and just hit this when this came up. Okay.
Thank you.
Sometimes if you just go the back button, sometimes it'll work, but I didn't want to mess with it. I knew how to do it the other way. So.
What is that gentleman's name in the office of here?
Kevin.
Oh, okay. I've met him just once or twice. He's spoken to me several times.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to do Benson Days. Would you be interested in coming down for a while?
There's a possibility. When is that?
It's going to be Saturday. And anywhere from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, anytime in between. There, we have a spot at 12 to 2
That's the question.
so I thought maybe you'd want to do
Is there a
that.
shady spot?
Oh, we're in front of a business, so I don't know. Because since I haven't even been there, but I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, because you're right on the main drive
Yeah.
in Benson, and it's what is it, between 61st Avenue and 60th.
Oh,
And we're right across the street from the theater, and we're
To
at
take the whole of your cognition, chop into a bunch of little pieces, and then use those pieces reassembled to make a model of how it is that humans navigate their way around the world and think about other people. Using that model, you could then characterize how particular people are different. We call that computational psychology. It's a very new area. The analogy is with a periodic table of the elements. Pulse of the Planet is made possible in part by the National Science Foundation. I'm Jim Metzner. Thank you, Jim Metzner, for Pulse of the Planet. You're tuned to the Radio Talking Book Network in Nebraska. Proudly. All right, gentlemen, we're not on the air now.
Oh, thank
break is about to end, so we'll be coming back to you in just a few seconds. Please stand by.
Thank you.
Stay live through the facilities of NET, radio, and television. Now, let's return to our readers for the second hour of reading from today's Omaha World Herald and the Lincoln Journal-Star. Here once again are Bill Everhart and Jack Martin. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Paul. And we're back. Here from the Lincoln Journal-Star opinion page are some of the contributions from the people in the area. The first one they call support for SAS. You are absolutely correct. Joseph W. Johnson, Jr. The item was SAS's actions, juvenile, July 26th. This is one Nebraskan who will never forget the courage it took for Ben Sass to stand up for what is right and just versus supporting a demagogue and a bully. I, for one, will always give him my vote in the future. Thank you, Ben Sass, for showing the nation that not all Nebraskans would blindly follow a demagogue and a bully and the real liar in this scenario. And that was contributed by Nadette Cheney of Bennett. And the next, more supervisors, not the answer. Why is it no surprise that the answer to the staff dilemma with the Department of Corrections can be solved with more supervisors? The story, 2 prison staffing pilots go forward July 20th. In the many years I was employed by the state, the caseloads were so high for the local workers to manage that we begged for more workers. Just as the workers of the Department of Corrections, we were always rewarded with more supervisors instead. Just the answer the workers need. It's a plan that shores up the top and leaves the few at the bottom to do the actual work. Signed, Bernice Russell from Gurley. And the last is refreshing story of brotherhood. What a great article Lindsay Esparago wrote about Irv Williams being the house father at the Beta Theta Pi fraternity house. The story, Sons Come to the Aid of Beta's Big Man, July 18th. Since his 10 years at the Beat House, Irv has had the considerable health problems and medical bills have appeared. Enter Abe Karimi, a 2010 pledge who lost his mother to cancer. He made calls, and a great majority of the 163 donors were Betas. The rest were Nebraskans he had met and people from his hometown in North Carolina. How refreshing to read a positive story about a great fraternity and its house father, signed Jane Allman Lincoln. And here is Jack.
Thank you, Bill. Well, let's turn to a political commentary by Eric Frazier of the Charlotte Observer, Dateline, Philadelphia. And he says, here at the Democratic National Convention, supporters of Bernie Sanders are seething with righteous rage over those now infamous leaked emails. See, they say the game was always rigged against Bernie and the grassroots. Their anger has forced Sanders' nemesis, Democratic National Committee Chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, to resign her post. She seemed reluctant to leave the spotlight Monday and was booed heartily when she addressed the Florida delegation. Hillary Clinton supporters, they acknowledge it was wrong for DNC staffers to have been bad-mouthing Sanders, as the email showed. The DNC formally apologized to Sanders and his supporters. So it was a day for strong feelings and passionate words. But in all of the marching and shouting and protesting, I kept coming back to the three-word sentence I kept hearing over and over from both Clinton delegates and Sanders supporters. Those words were, I'm not surprised. The game is rigged, as the Russians or whomever it was showed by pulling back the curtains on America's political elite. And absolutely no one is shocked at that fact. Rigged not just because some party staffers liked Clinton more than Sanders. Rigged, more importantly, because the leaked emails showed how the party cozied up to wealthy donors in exchange for big dollar contributions. It's the same smarmy transactional game we've come to know so well. Not quite a direct quid pro quo, not quite pay to play, but just slimy enough to remind average voters that the rich and the powerful aren't quite playing by the same political rules as everyone else. And yet for all these years, nobody's done anything to change it. The gears of our political machinery have been gummed up by big money for so long that everyone just takes it for granted. Washington has disappointed us so consistently that we simply assume the worst. And year after year, decade after decade, we accept it. We're not surprised, perpetually so. And in that, we have bipartisan unity. The GOP's grassroots sent Jeb Bush and his army of big money donors home and instead handed this nomination to Donald Trump. About as emphatic a blow it all up temper tantrum as America has seen since the electorate throw in modern memory. People are sick of feeling that their votes don't count, or don't count as much as the checks of the big donors. They're tired of the two-party stranglehold on political power. They're tired of a political elite that seems incapable of solving the problems of average, everyday people. But you get the sense here in Philadelphia that the rage on the left and the right is more than just a temper tantrum. Walk around downtown and you could be forgiven for thinking that Sanders, not Clinton, won the election. You see 5 Sanders t-shirts, signs, and buttons for every one of Clinton's. His young supporters bounce along as if they're headed for a rock concert. They aren't ready for their revolution to be over. They seem to be taking delight in the angst they are bringing on the defenders of the hated status quo, so neatly embodied by Hillary Clinton. The rest of this convention could prove just as chaotic as the Republicans' fight fest in Cleveland, perhaps even more so. Sanders urged his supporters Monday to simmer down, but they were having none of it. This is messy, unpredictable stuff, and few of us saw it coming. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Here's Bill.
Thank you, Jack. Here's a item by Dana Milbank, and he says some Trump-style speculation on the GOP and Putin from Philadelphia. Donald Trump never met a conspiracy theory he didn't like until now. He has dabbled in, among other things, the notion that President Obama is a Muslim born in Kenya, that Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia was murdered, and that Ted Cruz's father was involved in the JFK assassination. But on one topic, Trump is conspicuously incurious, the suggestion that he is complicit in a plan by Vladimir Putin to influence the U.S. election. Consider how Trump might react to the following fact pattern if the candidate involved weren't Donald Trump, but let's pick a name at random. Here, Hillary Clinton. The candidate's real estate empire, unable to borrow from most U.S. banks, gets capital from Russian sources. Such transfers couldn't occur without Putin's blessing. The candidate's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, has worked extensively for pro-Putin oligarchs. One of the candidates' real estate empire, unable to borrow from most U.S. banks, gets capital from Russian sources. Such I'm reading it twice, couldn't occur without Putin's blessing. The candidate's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, has worked extensively for pro-Putin oligarchs. One of the candidate's foreign policy advisors, Michael Flynn, was filmed sitting with Putin at a Moscow banquet celebrating a Russian propaganda network. Another advisor, Carter Page, has close ties to Gazprom, the Russian energy company under Putin's thumb. One of the only interferences the campaign made in the Republican platform was to remove the language calling for providing lethal defensive weapons to Ukraine in its fight against Russian-backed separatists. The candidate cast doubt on the utility of NATO and said he might not come to the aid of Baltic members of the alliance attacked by Russia. Putin has aimed to destabilize rival powers by supporting extremist parties in several European countries. His state news outlets have been heavily supportive of the candidate. Russian intelligence hacked the Democratic National Committee, and experts say handed the emails to WikiLeaks for release on the eve of the Democratic Convention. If the Clinton campaign were so extensively interwoven with Putin's Russia, it is a safe bet that Trump would be demanding that Clinton release her tax returns to prove that she's not beholden to Putin, just as he demanded that Obama release his birth certificate. He would also very likely float allegations masquerading as questions by using phrases a lot of people have said, or I'm hearing, or there's something we don't know about, but Trump, I'm hearing you won't be doing that in this case, so let's help him. The following are all phrases Trump has used to float conspiracy theories, but this time applies to his Putin ties combined with Trump-style speculation. A lot of people have said Putin is trying to get Trump elected so he can blackmail the American president. Somebody told me Trump would completely go out of business if Putin took back all the Russian money he let Trump have. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I just hear Trump's airplane would be grounded immediately. Manafort helping the oligarchs, Flynn having dinner with Putin, Page getting money from Gazprom, no coincidence. Now it's coming out that Putin wants to destabilize America. There's something fishy about the whole thing. And why did Trump propose changing NATO and Ukraine policy in ways that would benefit Putin? Obviously, some people think it's evil intentions. I think it's incompetence, regardless of a lot of people think it's evil intentions. I don't bring up the possibility that Trump has already bribed or been blackmailed by Putin because I don't know enough to really discuss it. I will say there are people who continue to bring it up because they think it's absolutely bribery and blackmail. I don't do that because I don't think it's fair. I'm hearing it's a big topic, the question of whether Trump is guilty of treason. I'm not sure. I mean, let people make their own determination. Trump never denied that Putin was his patron. He cannot give us his tax returns. He didn't pay his taxes, or if he did, there's something in those returns that is very bad for him. Now somebody told me, and I have no idea whether this is bad for him or not, but perhaps it would be, that he owes billions to Putin. Somebody said maybe that's the reason he doesn't want to show his returns. I don't think so. I just think he paid his taxes. Why is Trump so emphatic about not talking about his Putin connections? He gets it better than anybody understands. There's something going on. There's something we don't know about. I don't know. All I know is what's on the internet. Wow. Here's Jack.
All right, let's turn to the letters to the editor of the World Herald, beginning with one from Frank Mitchell of Bellevue, who says that King's words were misinterpreted. He says the July 21st column by the World Herald's Matthew Hansen, headlined "Historians Rebut Representative King's View of History," provided a lopsided interpretation unwarranted by Iowa U.S. Congressman Steve King's actual words. The historians set up a silly caricature of King, which they could then ridicule. One called King's remarks, quote, "white supremacist language," end quote. However, King used the phrase Western civilization, not white people. The phrase Christianity's footprint was another clue. His remarks were about the special contribution of Western civilization's social values rather than genetics and race. In fairness to World Herald readers and King, Mr. Hansen should also report on this more reasonable interpretation of King's remarks. Our society benefits a lot more from journalism that looks objectively at both sides of a story. And a letter from Chris Kudlatz of Ralston says the city of Omaha and the Terrence Crawford camp should partner up and promote one another. A campaign about Omaha from Crawford and vice versa. Omaha has so many wonderful things to promote. Why not promote our own world champion? He is a wonderful son of Omaha and a fantastic representative for our city and state. Crawford always promotes Omaha and Nebraska when on TV or after a fight, and always thanks his fans. Let's thank him back. And Catherine Allen of Omaha says that good Samaritans really exist. She says, last week I left my purse in a shopping cart at a local grocery store after loading groceries in my car. I got home and realized that my purse was gone. I raced back to the store. I checked with customer service at the store and no purse had been turned in. I canceled my debit card and credit cards and had to get a temporary driver's license the next day. A few days later, I got a call from our building manager who asked if I had lost my purse. She said that a resident turned in my purse to her office. It had been found in a bag in our foyer. Nothing was missing. My faith in mankind has been restored. And Bob Cole of Omaha says, I thought Val Oson's July 25th letter titled "We're Losing Teachers to Poor Morale" was great. The race or sex of students should not be taken into consideration when being disciplined. If they do not behave in school, then they should be disciplined. Being politically correct does not do our society any good. If you do the crime, you do the time. More teachers need to speak up. Thanks, Val. And Matthias Sanders of Omaha writes that we're surrounded by good folks. Says to the well-intentioned Public Pulse letter writer who, after seeing an African-American family with children placing flowers on the grave of Carrie Orozco, found it a sign of hope. There are African-Americans all over this country who are raising their children to be strong, prayerful, and empathetic people. Please get to know your neighbors, and scenes like this will not surprise you. And back to Bill.
11:18 is the time. Here is an editorial, a Journal Star editorial from the opinion page, and it says, editorial July 28th, Trump's role in return of David Duke. It is appalling that David Duke, former head of the Ku Klux Klan, thinks that his point of view has become legitimate. The climate of this country has moved in my direction, Duke said as he registered for Louisiana's U.S. Senate race. If Duke is right, Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump bears part of the blame. That's what the other leading Republicans said before the party began closing ranks. When Trump claimed that a federal judge hearing a case against Trump University was a hater, a Mexican, and hostile, House Speaker Paul Ryan called Trump's words the textbook definition of a racist comment. Senator Marco Rubio said that Trump was feeding into a narrative of anger and bitterness and frustration. If this continues, Rubio said, I think this country will continue to be ripped apart at the seams. He is a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party. He doesn't represent the values that the men and women who wear the uniform are fighting for, said Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. There are numerous reports of the racist comments from Trump supporters at his rallies. When the Southern Poverty Law Center asked K through 12 teachers about the effect the election is having on their students, teachers volunteered that Trump is making ethnic tensions worse. There is ample reason to hope that Duke's candidacy won't go anywhere. Local Republican leaders in Louisiana were quick to denounce him. Roger Valeri, chairman of the Louisiana State Party organization, called Duke a hate-filled fraud who does not embody the values of the Republican Party. Ward Baker with the Republican Senatorial Committee told the Associated Press that Duke will not get support from the organization under any circumstances. In addition to his bigotry, Duke has other weaknesses as a candidate. He is a convicted felon who spent a year in prison for mail fraud and tax evasion. Even Trump seems willing to distance himself from Duke now that he has officially claimed the Republican nomination. When asked by NBC's Chuck Todd if he would support a Democrat over Duke, Trump said, "I guess, depending on who the Democrat is, but the answer would be yes." Trump stressed that he wanted it on the record that he rebuked Duke as quick as you can say it. Because the last time when another person in this position, I did it very quickly and they said he didn't do it fast enough, Trump said, "Rebuke, is that okay? Rebuke, done." Trump's reference was to an earlier interview in which Trump said he had a malfunctioning earpiece. Let's hope that Trump's supporters who thought that bigotry was back in style take their cue from Trump's most recent comment. Trump should follow up that comment with more like it. And here's Jack.
Well, let's move on to the features section of the World Herald. The first story says that Opera Omaha's music director has resigned. Music director Jay Goff, GAWF, is no longer with Opera Omaha. The 53-year-old Goff resigned the position on July 18th, according to Roger Weitz, the opera company's general director. Weitz would not elaborate, nor would he comment on plans to replace Goff. Earlier this month, Goff pleaded no contest to abuse of a vulnerable adult for taking about $113,000 from his mother, who has dementia. Attorney Randy Paragas said his client used the money to finance a gambling addiction. Goff is known professionally as Jay Goff, but his formal name is John C. Goff Jr. Paragas and prosecutors are to work out how much money Goff must replace in his mother's account. And a new service has spread its wings to help some of Nebraska's feathered friends. Fontanelle Farms launched a 24/7 hotline dedicated solely to assisting injured or orphaned raptors. The Raptor Rescue Line will connect callers with a regional expert who will be able to advise them. The toll-free hotline is open now at 1-866-888-7261. The Forest Raptor Recovery Program has rescued 347 birds of prey of 21 different species so far this year.
Thank you, Jack. Here is Ask Amy. Her headline says, "Introvert wonders how to explain self to others." Dear Amy, sorry. I am an only child who was raised by parents who were approaching 50 when I was born. There were no other children on the street where we lived. I attended a tiny religious school that was several miles away from where we lived. I grew up very alone, and I learned to like being alone. And that is my problem. I like being alone, yet everyone around me assumes that I am lonely because I've never been married and have no children or other social ties. I like people only in very small doses. I can enjoy being interested in a new person for an hour, but then I really have no desire to ever see them again. With considerable effort, I can pretend to be interested in my coworkers' lives for 10 minutes at a time, but really all I want to do is do my job and then leave so I can go to do things that make me happy. My idea of a perfect day is to go hiking alone and then eat solo at an ethnic restaurant that serves some type of food I've never tried before, while socializing with the usual foreign staff, and then attending a lecture at a nearby university, or go home and read. I have done many activities with other people, but I find their company exhausting. I also find it too stressful to lie and pretend that I have family obligations or some other made-up reason why I don't have time to be someone's friend. So what do I do? Telling the truth, and I'm not interested in even being social, let alone being someone's best friend, ends up hurting people's feelings. And telling polite lies leads people to just try harder to persuade me to socialize. How do I cope with a world that is focused on social connection when I am alone but not lonely? Signed, Not Lonely Woman. Dear Not Lonely, first you should read the book Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain, published in 2013, Broadway Books. The groundbreaking look into the life and motivations of introverts will help you to understand yourself and also put into context your own relationship to the noise of the world. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with the way other people relate. It just comes down to a difference in the need or desire for human connection. And the next, dear Amy, I've been living with my mom in subsidized housing all my life. I just turned 25 and I'm engaged to my girlfriend. She moved back to her hometown, out of state, while I finished my education. I've been excited about the idea of starting a new chapter in my life, but I'm worried on how to break it to my mom because it also means she will have to move out of the apartment that's been her home for 16 years. I don't want to make her sad. Signed, A Scared Son. You're scared. You don't say what sort of subsidized housing you are in, but you might help your mother by researching or assisting her to research, if necessary, the rules and guidelines for this housing. Go over the lease terms and check the HUD.gov website guidelines. Break your news to her quietly, firmly, and with compassion for her complicated feelings. If losing you as a dependent means that your mother has to move into a different apartment, you can help her the most by understanding that this presents a stress for her. If, however, it is not your responsibility to never grow up and leave home in order to protect your mother from feeling sad. Your job is to maintain or obtain your education, find useful work, forge healthy relationships, and go out into the world. Your mother's job is to let you. And the last, dear Amy, I disagreed with your response to frustrated by family. The woman who wrote to you had a much younger sister, age 21, who wanted to bring a friend to visit the older sister. I think the younger sister wanted to bring the friend as cover. My much older sister was so judgmental toward me that I didn't know how to relate to her, especially when I was a young adult. You should have advised frustrated to be more understanding toward her. Signed, Younger Sister. Dear younger sister, the dynamic you described could well be in play in this relationship, but frustrated didn't present any evidence. Here's Jack.
And another short story says that author Kyra Gale will host a free program on the assassination of Meriwether Lewis of Lewis and Clark fame. Gale, who is the author of a book called Meriwether Lewis, The Assassination of an American Hero in the Silver Mines of Mexico, will present the case for assassination by examining a series of forged documents. She will speak at 3 p.m. Saturday at the headquarters of the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail, which is at 601 Riverfront Drive at the foot of the Bob Carey pedestrian bridge. Meriwether Lewis, who became governor of Louisiana Territory after his 1804 to 1806 expedition to the Pacific coast, died at the age of 35 in 1809. He was on his way from St. Louis to Washington when he died on Tennessee's Natchez Trace. Though it was labeled a suicide, his death has remained a mystery. Gale proposes that General James Wilkinson, commanding general of the U.S. Army, was responsible for his assassination, and she provides an explanation as to how it was carried out. Gale has been writing about the Lewis and Clark expedition for 15 years. She is currently working on a second edition of Lewis and Clark Road Trips, Travel Planner and History Guide. And in another brief story, one of the world's foremost experts on sharks will give a free presentation at the Henry Doorly Zoo and Aquarium on Friday. Dr. Gregory Skomal, known to many for his work with the Discovery Channel's Shark Week, will speak about great white sharks, their impact on oceanic life, and his most recent research, which focuses on the impact of capture stress on sharks. The presentation will begin at 6 p.m. and will be held in the auditorium of the Wild Kingdom Pavilion. Skomal is head of the Massachusetts Shark Research Program and has worked as a senior fishery scientist with Massachusetts Marine Fisheries since 1987. He is an adjunct faculty member at the University of Massachusetts and an adjunct scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. He also has appeared in programs for National Geographic, on the Discovery Channel, and the BBC. Skomal's presentation is the third in the Zoo Speaker Series, which focuses on conservation research and environmental issues. Reservations are required for the free presentation, and arrangements can be made on the zoo's website, omahazoo.com.
11:31. Thank you, Jack. Here's Ask Dr. K. Dear Dr. K, I have developed many small, thin veins on my legs. I would like to get rid of them. What is the most effective treatment? The reply, dear reader, superficial leg veins, sometimes called spider veins, occur when tiny veins appear just below the surface of the skin, causing red, blue, or purple discolorations. Spider veins get their name from the shape of the discolorations. Some cases of spider veins can be quite small, others are more noticeable when they make you feel self-conscious. But they are harmless. I've put an illustration of a spider vein on my website, askdrk.com. Spider veins are a sign that there are abnormalities in the deeper veins of the legs. These deep veins have little valves in them. Blood in the veins of the legs is returning from the legs to the heart. When we are sitting or standing, gravity is pulling the blood downward away from the heart. The valves prevent gravity from doing that. As we get older, the valves become less effective. The extra blood that gravity pulls down into the leg vein causes the pressure in the veins to rise. Ultimately, that increased pressure swells the tiny veins beneath the skin, leading to spider veins. Spider veins are most common on the thighs, ankles, and calves. They are more common in women than men, and they can run in families. Some cases are related to pregnancy, the use of birth control pills, or weight gain. Spider veins may be permanent, or they may disappear on their own, especially if they are caused by pregnancy or certain medications. Spider veins do not require treatment for any medical reason. Treatment is usually done for cosmetic reasons only. In some people, support stockings may increase the size of existing spider veins and help to prevent new ones. If that does not do the trick, the two most common cosmetic treatments for spider veins are sclerotherapy and laser treatment. Sclerotherapy involves making a salt solution injected directly into the affected area. This liquid causes irritation and inflammation of the vein, leading to its collapse. The area may be tender for a few days. Any bruising should fade over a few weeks. Sclerotherapy may require multiple treatments. The injections can be slightly painful. And then laser treatment directs pulses from a laser light to the spider veins, causing tiny blood clots to form. The blood vessels that form the legs of the spider become blocked off and are reabsorbed by the body. Each treatment has its pros and cons. Sclerotherapy is better for larger veins, but it involves needles and injections. Laser therapy can be as effective for smaller veins, but it may result in loss of skin pigment. In studies comparing the treatments, sclerotherapy is more likely to be successful. Maintaining a healthy weight and staying physically fit tend to reduce the pressure inside leg veins. Wearing support hose can further protect against the development of more spider veins. To get rid of the ones you have, talk to your doctor about the alternatives I've described. And here's Jack.
Let's look at the history and almanac column of the World Herald, beginning with a quote from the Tao Te Ching, the sacred book of Taoism. And it says, quote, knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. If you realize that you have enough, you are truly rich. End quote. And some of the events on this date in history: in 1655, French dramatist and novelist Cyrano de Bergerac, the inspiration for a play by Edmond Rostand, died in Paris at age 36. In 1794, Maximilien Robespierre, a leading figure of the French Revolution, was sent to the guillotine. And on this date in 1866, British children's author Beatrix Potter, the author of Peter Rabbit, you might remember, was born in London. World War I began on this date in 1914 as Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. And in 1945, a U.S. Army bomber crashed into the 79th floor of New York's Empire State Building, killing 14 people. On this date in 1965, President Lyndon Johnson announced he was increasing the number of American troops in South Vietnam from 75,000 to 125,000. And in 1995, a jury in Union, South Carolina, rejected the death penalty for Susan Smith, sentencing her instead to life in prison for drowning her 2 young sons. Some of the birthdays of celebrities include actor Darryl Hickman, who is 85, former senator and National Basketball Association Hall of Famer Bill Bradley is 73. The creator of the comic strip Garfield, Jim Davis, is 71. Actress Linda Kelsey, whom you might remember from, I think, the Lou Grant TV show, is 70. And actress Sally Struthers of All in the Family fame is 69. Yet another character actress, Georgia Engel from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, is 68. And CBS anchorman Scott Pelley is 59. Moving on to Heloise's column. The first letter says, "Hello, Heloise. I read your column in the Village's Florida Daily Sun. I have black appliances, and when I clean them, there's a cloudy film on the surface. What is the best product to use when cleaning a black dishwasher, microwave, or stove?" And Heloise says, "A microfiber cloth is your friend in this case. Grab a damp towel and an ammonia-based cleaner, or even vinegar. Wipe away fingerprints and greasy smears and buff with a dry microfiber towel." And another letter says, "Dear readers," or from Heloise, says, "if your washer or dryer eats a sock, thus rendering a pair an impossibility, don't fret. Here are some hints for the remaining sock. Drop your phone into it for extra protection. Scoop fresh, dry coffee grounds into the sock and hang in the clothes closet to help remove musty odors. Slip the sock over a furniture leg when moving. Slide a damp sock over your hand and detail dust and clean hard-to-reach areas of your home. And finally, use the rib top of a crew sock as a hot coffee sleeve. You can decorate with buttons and exaggerated stitching for fun." And the last letter says, "Dear Heloise, we received lots of cards and gifts for my brother's 100th birthday. The cards got separated from the gifts with no return address. Please write inside the card your name, address, zip code, and what the gift was. This makes it so much easier to send thank you notes. This goes for birthdays, weddings, graduations, funerals, any event where you give a gift." And Bill?
Well, the time is 10:39. It won't be long. It's going to be 10:40. I think we'll go ahead and move to business and markets. From the Journal Star, here's a couple of briefs. Blue Blood already looking to expand. Less than 2 months after opening its new tap room, Blue Blood Brewing is planning to expand. In a news release, Blue Blood said it is adding parking spaces and will turn green space into an outdoor beer garden with a stage for live music. Blue Blood Brewing, which is kind of hard to say, opened its new 12,000 square foot brewery and tap room at Robbers Cave on June 8th. "We are grateful for the amount of community support we have received thus far. Business is booming," said Brian Budwinski, president and founder. The expansion plans include increased capacity in its cellar by nearly 1,000 barrels, Blue Blood now has 124 barrels on site at 925 Robbers Cave Road. Airfares, the cheapest since 2010. United States airfares were the cheapest they've been since 2010 in the first quarter of 2016, the federal government said Tuesday. The average price of a domestic ticket dropped to $361 in the first quarter, down 7.8% from the same period in 2015, according to the U.S. Department of Transportation. The fare data are adjusted for inflation and don't include fees for optional services such as baggage fees. Last week, United said passenger unit revenue was down 6.6% in the second quarter of 2016, compared with the same period in 2015, which the airline blamed in part on industry-wide capacity outstripping demand, which can push fares down. And orders plunge for durable goods. From Washington, orders to U.S. factories for long-lasting manufactured goods fell in June by the largest amount in nearly 2 years, reflecting a big decline in the volatile category of commercial aircraft and broad weakness across a number of other areas. The key category that tracks business investment eked out a small gain. Demand for durable goods dropped 4% in June, the biggest setback since an 18.4% drop in August of 2014, the Commerce Department reported Wednesday. Excluding the volatile transportation area, orders would have still been down, but by a smaller 0.5%. The new report was weaker than analysts had been expecting and indicates manufacturing remains under stress from weak global demand and a strong dollar. It is a tale of two economies, said Chris Rupke, chief financial economist at MUFG Union Bank. Consumer expenditures are strong with the economy at full employment, but companies are pulling back as the strong dollar and slower world growth are taking a toll on exports. The 4% decline in orders in June followed a 2.8% drop in May and a 3.2% drop in April. Here's Jack.
And on another note, with 9 months passed with no news on the future of Cabela's since an activist investor declared its stake in the retailer, state officials say they're focused on keeping the company's headquarters in Nebraska. But national economic consultants say there's only so much the state can do as the Sydney-based operator of outdoor stores tussles with an out-of-town activist investor that is pushing for big changes that might include even a possible sale of the company. At stake are more than 2,000 jobs in Sydney. It's a town of about 6,800, and about 700 jobs in Lincoln, where the retailer runs its credit card business. The director of the Nebraska Department of Economic Development told the World Herald that Cabela's has not asked for anything from the state. Still, Director Courtney Dinklinger said in a statement, quote, "We are committed to assisting them with available programs or resources at our disposal," end quote. Cabela's didn't respond to multiple requests for comment. Elliott Management, the activist investor, also didn't respond to requests for comment. Governor Pete Ricketts spoke to Cabela's chief executive Tommy Milner in June at an event in Lincoln, but the governor's spokesman did not detail what was said. Dedlinger said state officials would, quote, "continue to keep open lines of communication and stand ready to help a company," she said, was iconic to Nebraska. Cabela's is on Fortune magazine's list of the 1,000 largest U.S. companies, and it's the only Nebraska company outside of the Omaha area on the list. News reports over the last several months, all citing anonymous sources, have suggested a sale of Cabela's retail arm to competitor Bass Pro Shops and Goldman Sachs is imminent. The chatter comes less than a year after Conagra Foods, formerly based in Omaha, announced that it would relocate its headquarters to Chicago. State officials have said they were laying out an incentive package to tempt the processed foods manufacturer to stay in Nebraska just days before it announced the move.
11:45, we're moving to sports. Lincoln Northeast kicker recounts how Foltz inspired others on his final day. It began to rain and there were flashes of lightning in the distance, and none of this seemed a big deal at the time, just a minor nuisance as about 400 kids retreated into a gymnasium. Punters and place kickers, many of them serving as both for their high school teams. They had been invited to this camp because they were good at what they did. Cody Gronewald, about to be a senior at Lincoln Northeast, was one of them. He was one of the lucky ones who learned from Sam Foltz on Saturday. He punted in front of Foltz and listened intently to the Husker punter's advice. You couldn't miss Foltz at a camp like this. Not only could he unload 70-yard rocket punts that dropped jaws of the high school kids looking on, he loved to get to know them. Some kickers and punters just go about their own business. Gronewald will tell you, not Foltz. Sam was talking to everyone, telling people if their drop was inside, what happened, what was wrong. If they didn't have a decent ball, Gronewald said, there's just some people that you can tell there's something better about them. As the weather grew angry outside, the kids attending the Coles kicking camp in Wales, Wisconsin, found themselves listening to recruiting stories and advice from college kickers volunteering at the camp. Foltz, being Foltz, you bet he took his turn at the microphone. ESPN announcer Joe Tessitore, whose son was at the camp, recounted the next day on air how Foltz told an inspirational story of motivation and mentoring and leadership in his own life, story of going for a dream. The kid honing his craft just down the road from Memorial Stadium was part of the captivated crowd. He talked about how he bleeds red and how he's from a small town and realizes his dream to go to Nebraska, Gronewald said. He had other options, but he really wanted to go to Nebraska, and he walked on and just worked hard every day to get where he is. He just put all his attention on what was in front of him to try to make them, the Huskers, the best they could be. Gronewald had gotten to know Foltz at camps throughout the years. He already knew that the punter many assumed would go on to a long career in the NFL loved to connect like this. What nobody in that gym would know was that they wouldn't see Foltz or former Michigan State punter Mike Sadler the next day. The storm did not relent. The Wisconsin roads were wet. By that Saturday night, Foltz and Sadler were gone, victims of a car crash that put tears in the eyes of so many. Here's Jack.
Well, the PGA Golf Championship tournament began today at the Baltusrol Golf Club in Springfield, New Jersey. And among the hopefuls there is Sergio Garcia, looking to win his first major ever after a long career. The story begins, Henrik Stenson took his silver claret jug and headed straight for Switzerland after the British Open to play in a charity event organized by Sergio Garcia. It turned out to be the perfect occasion to deliver an important message to the host. Stenson was 40 years old when he won the British Open at Royal Troon. He had paid his dues with a trio of close calls in the majors, and it was his time. Garcia has paid even more. It started when he was a 19-year-old trying to chase down Tiger Woods at Medina. He played in the final group with Woods at Bethpage Black and Royal Liverpool in PGA tournaments, and he twice was beaten in the final holes by Padre Harrington at Karnowski and Oakland Hills. Sergio told reporters, quote, Henrik, when I saw him at my event in Switzerland, said, you know, I'm 40, you're 36. You still have probably 16 more before you get there. So at the end of the day, if you stay healthy, you still can give yourself a lot of chances here and there. That's my goal, Garcia said, to keep giving myself chances and hopefully take as many as possible in coming years, end quote. Stenson's victory has shifted the focus to Garcia, perhaps more than any other player in the final major of the year, particularly in a season of first-time major champions. There was Danny Willett at the Masters, Dustin Johnson at the U.S. Open, and then Stenson. Stenson said, quote, it just shows that you've got to keep on trying. It was nice to see Dustin win at the U.S. Open. He's had some close calls and some heartbreaking calls in the last 4 or 5 years. And you've got to keep putting yourself in position. The more times you do that, that's what gives you chances for it to happen, end quote. Lee Westwood is another player on the dubious list of best to have never won a major. The 43-year-old Englishman had a chance at the U.S. Open, British Open, and Masters in successive years, and he is among two players, Luke Donald is the other, to reach the status of number one golfer in the world without ever having won a major. Ricky Fowler at number 7 in the world and Garcia at number 10 are the only players in the top 10 who have not won a major. Garcia is different because he has been at a high level for so long, just not high enough. The Spaniard is no longer as temperamental, at times petulant, as he was earlier in his career when he accomplished so much at an early age that he expected so much more. He complained about the breaks that Woods got from the weather in the 2002 U.S. Open. His worst moment was in the 2007 British Open at Karnowski, when he suggested he was playing, quote, more than the field because he couldn't catch a break. He has thrown clubs and he has kicked shoes. Now it almost seems as though Garcia has resigned that his career could end without a major, even though he has such a long road ahead of him. Yes, he is surprised to have not won one as he approaches 2 decades of playing them. He said it would have bothered him 5 or 10 years ago, but no longer. I understand how difficult it is to win every week, he said. It doesn't matter if it's a major. It doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter if it's in the U.S., in Asia, in Europe, in Africa. It's tough to win. So that's great for the game of golf. And the only thing I can do is just keep giving myself chances and just wait for it.
Thank you, Jack. From the Journal-Star, here is NU and area news. Mitch Vernon has been named baseball coach at Lincoln Southwest. This goal announced Wednesday. Vernon, who teaches special ed, has been with the Southwest baseball program 7 years, including the past 6 as the Silverhawks junior varsity coach. We are very excited to have Mitch take over the program, Southwest Athletic Director Mark Armstrong said. He has been a vital part of the successes we have had over the past several years, and we will continue that strong tradition. He will continue that strong tradition. Vernon takes over for Nick Schieffer, who stepped down as Southwest coach after 1 season. The Silverhawks finished 3rd in the final Class A ratings. Football. The Cincinnati Bengals signed former Husker defensive end Jack Gangwich. Having not played a snap until his 4th year in the Husker program, the Wood River native quickly became a fan favorite after moving up from walk-on to scholarship player to black shirt and team captain. Playing in 10 games last year and starting 9, Gangwich totaled 15 tackles, including 4 for a loss and 1.5 sacks, while adding 7 quarterback hurries. The Bengals roster also includes former Husker Rex Burkhead and Trevor Roach. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers claimed former Husker Daniel Davey off waivers Wednesday, 1 day after the Beatrice graduate was waived by the Indianapolis Colts. The 6'1", 190-pounder was limited by injuries as a Husker senior, but had solid showings at the NFL Combine. And tennis, Lincoln native Jack Sock used strong serving to roll past fellow American Donald Young 6'4", 6'3" in the 2nd round of the Rogers Cup in Toronto. Sock, the number 16 seed, lost just 9 points on his serve and never faced a break point in advancing to a 3rd round showdown Thursday with number 2 seed Stan Wawrinka of Switzerland, a 2-time Grand Slam champion. It will be Sock's first career meeting against the 5th-ranked player in the world. Here's Jack.
Let's check out a few sports brief items. First one is from East Lansing, Michigan. Michigan State's athletic department is establishing a scholarship fund to honor Mike Sadler, the former Spartans punter who died in a car accident last Saturday in Wisconsin. Sadler and Nebraska punter Sam Foltz died in a crash after attending a kicking camp in Wisconsin. The Mike Sadler Legacy Football Scholarship Fund will enable a Michigan State football player to receive a scholarship each year in his honor. Sadler was a 4-year starter and 4-time academic All-American at Michigan State. He finished his college career after the 2014 season. And from Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin has hit out at what he called discrimination against the country's banned track and field athletes. Fencers, triathletes, and table tennis players became the latest teams of Russians to be cleared to compete in the Olympics by the governing bodies of their sports ahead of the Moscow ceremony. But the IAAF rejected a bid by the bulk of the track and field team to be reinstated. More than 100 Russians from the 387-strong Olympic team have been banned from going to Rio de Janeiro. Putin said, quote, "We can't accept indiscriminate disqualification of our athletes with an absolutely clean doping history. We cannot and will not accept what in fact is pure discrimination," end quote. He said the athletes banned from the Olympics were victims of a campaign to present Russian sports in a bad light. And closer to home from Ames, Iowa, former Alabama head basketball coach David Hobbs has been named a special assistant to Iowa State coach Steve Prohm, a former team manager under Hobbs with the Crimson Tide. Hobbs spent 6 seasons at Alabama, winning 110 games from 1992 to 1998. He later was an assistant in Kentucky for 7 seasons with head coach Tubby Smith. Hobbs has worked in the NBA since 2008, serving as a scout for Charlotte, Brooklyn, and Utah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Baseball. Manfred. More pace of play rules needed from Miami. Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred says more rule changes are needed to improve the pace of play, and one proposal under consideration is a limitation on relief pitching changes in an inning or a game. The majors shaved several minutes off the average game time last season, but games have been slightly longer in 2016. We've slipped back a little bit this year, and pace of play is one of those issues where we're going to continually need to evaluate the rules we have, Manfred said, and we're going to need to continually work with our players to stay focused on the issue. Manfred has said he's in favor of a limitation on relief pitchers, but didn't lobby for it Wednesday. Manfred spoke at the Phillies game at Marlins Park, where he helped unveil the logo for the 2017 All-Star Game. It will be played next July 11th, with the Marlins hosting the game in their 25th season. Miami is going to be a great venue, Manfred said. We had a wonderful experience in San Diego, and I know Miami is going to top that. And also covering the bases, Raul Mondesi had a bunt single for the first big league hit, with 2 runs scoring on the play on pitcher Matt Shoemaker's throwing error, as the Kansas City Royals rallied for a 7-5 victory over the LA Angels on Wednesday night. Shoemaker, who did not allow a base runner until the fifth inning, yielded singles to former Husker Alex Gordon and Paulo Orlando to start the 7th. Mondesi, who was called up Tuesday, put down a bunt and beat Shoemaker's 5-11 throw to the first as the ball sailed into the right field. Both runners scored, and Mondesi wound up on third. Angels manager Mike Scioscia came out of claiming interference, and after a 6-minute, 15-second review, the call on the field was not changed. Scioscia officially protested the game. Mondesi added an RBI infield single in a 2-run 8th, and the second run scored on pitcher Jose Alvarez's throwing error. Let's see, Manfred, we've said that already. More pace rules needed. Yes. Do you have anything short there?
Yes, I've got a short item here from Lincoln. The Nebraska wrestling coach Mark Manning has been named one of 3 Olympic freestyle wrestling coaches volunteers for the United States in Rio de Janeiro. The other volunteers are Tom Brands of Iowa and Lou Rosselli, an associate head coach at Ohio State. Mark Manning has been working with Jordan Burroughs throughout this summer, helping him prepare for a chance to win a 2nd Olympic gold medal in Rio. Manning was a volunteer coach at the 2012 London Olympics and received the Terry McCann Freestyle Coach of the Year award for the 2nd time in April. He also took home the honor in 2011 when he helped Burroughs win his first world title just months after claiming his 2nd NCAA championship. Since that time, Burroughs has won the 2012 Olympic gold medal and added world crowns in 2013 and 2015. And folks, we have reached the noon hour, and we wish you a good week ahead, and see you next
And
week.
pleasant afternoon. Yeah, thank you. Enjoyed it, Jack.
Yeah.
And thank you both very, very much. Thank you, Bill Everhart. Thank you, Jack Martin, for coming in and giving of your time.